There is a specter haunting Europe. The Russian bear has awoken and presents a new threat to peace and security. In almost 3 years of Machiavellian politics and non-linear warfare, Russia has taken over very little of a country that's basically half Russian? Never mind. In the Baltics, Russia's overbearing power has succeeded in dramatically accelerating NATO's militarization of the Russian border? Let's move on to Syria. In 5 years of brutal fighting, unleashing the savage power of World War II-era bombing, Russia has successfully defended a little less than half of the territory of one of their only foreign allies, against a bunch of yahoos who spend more time fighting each other than they do fighting Assad. Are you beginning to see the problem with the narrative here? No matter where you look, you'll find a U.S. journalist or government official trying desperately to convince us that Russia is a serious threat to our national security. Oddly, this seems to be a collaboration between the Western media and the Russian government. In May of 2016, when Russia threw an odd victory concert in the ruins of Palmyra, the BBC and company were all there in force to cover it. When the Syrian and Russian militaries were thrown out of Palmyra 7 months later by a bunch of video gamers with Toyota-mounted machine guns, it was barely mentioned. In the aftermath of the 2016 U.S. election, this commentary has reached a fever pitch. Democratic voters, who used to be slightly less enthusiastic warmongers, have latched onto Russia as one of the many excuses for their loss. The story seems to be that Russia unleashed the awesome power of teenagers with laptops and a state-run TV channel to corrupt our democracy or something. If you look at these stories with anything like critical thinking, it's clear that they're blown out of proportion. As I've highlighted elsewhere, Russian maneuvering has neatly highlighted the arrogance and foolishness of a bunch of U.S. policies. This is not an indication of Russian strength or the new Cold War that the U.S. military-industrial complex so desperately wants. In fact, if you look a little more closely at how Russia is actually doing, the picture is quite different. The country is a pale shadow of what it was in 1989. Russia is barely keeping it together. Consider some events from the last month. On December 19th, Andrei G. Karlov, the Russian ambassador to Turkey, was murdered during a speech he was giving in Ankara. What kind of superpower fails to keep its representatives safe? I suppose there's not much you can do to stop a lone gunman, but the fact that the killer was able to make a speech before he was stopped is just embarrassing. This pattern of haplessness turned even more tragic on Christmas Day. A Russian military choir was among the 92 people killed when a Russian military plane disintegrated shortly after takeoff from Russia. If it had made it to Syrian airspace, there at least would have been some propaganda value there. Terrorists could have been blamed. Instead, it's just another illustration of Russian incompetence. The power of Russia is nothing to be feared. What we should be afraid of is Russian weakness. The fact that everybody in Washington, D.C. is now gearing up for a new Cold War is a real problem. If we go too far, we risk turning Russia into a failed state. A failed state with nuclear weapons. That is a far more likely doomsday scenario than war between Russia and the United States. If World War III does eventually break out, Russia won't be the enemy. Like France 75 years ago, it is far more likely to be a battleground rather than a combatant. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. And if you'd like to help me make more videos like this one, please click on the Patreon link here to find out how. Thanks.